Perhaps it would be helpful at this time to look at a model of Jung's understanding of the psyche. If we take this circle as the self that includes the known, the unknown, everything, and if we hold this line as the threshold of consciousness, by threshold, I mean it's that space when you're waking up, when you just come over into this world, or you can fall back into sleep. Here is the unconscious, here is the so-called world of consciousness. Between those two is this little tiny ego, tiny little thing. And yet all of our world, our reality, moves through that space. It's partly in the unconscious, partly in consciousness.
The only way to meet a persecuting demon is to turn around and to say, here I am, what do you want from me? Then the nightmarish pursuer generally changes face. It simply represents that we have turned away from some part of our psyche, and therefore it runs after us. It wants to get at us, literally. But we don't want it. The unconscious shows us the face we show it. If we reject something within us, then it becomes destructive to us. And if we don't reject it, that's what I mean by saying, turning around and saying, in a friendly manner, what do you want? Then you suddenly see that it isn't so bad. Then you have a chance that whatever pursues one shows a more amenable face, and that one can make some pact with it or some arrangement. Mechanism, so to speak. I mean, projection and reflection are a pair of opposite. Mm-hmm. Because projection, as the word says, throws behind your back your own psychic images and contents into the outer world. We live all the time in projections. We live in a world of projection. And reflection is the act by taking that back into yourself. But you can't do that by your own willpower. I mean, you have to be helped by the self.
Mm-hmm. So both of these activities of the psyche are below the ego or beyond the ego. It's not a will.
Oh yes, they are beyond the ego, but the ego can cooperate with them or persevere in wrong. For instance, Jung defines in a narrower sense projection that we can only speak of a projection, though it's constant projection. What I think about you is a projection. What I think about all these people is a projection. I don't know you well enough to really know you. I have an image and I have a judgment, an intuitive judgment, but it's probably a lot of my own psyche in it. And but that you cannot call projection. Jung says in a strict sense, you can only begin to call it projection when it's disturbing, when there is a disturbance. When I, for instance, constantly quarrel with you or constantly misunderstand you, and it becomes a kind of difficulty between you and me, then one can speak of a projection. And that is also the symptom which shows now the moment is to take it back, to reflect. The disturbance is the symptom which wants you to reflect. And to say, now, why am I so emotional, or why do I have these negative feelings each time I meet that person, or so on.
And that is the beginning of reflection?
And that's the beginning of reflection, but it's only achieved when you really see in yourself that quality which irritates you or which you admire in the other.
In the unconscious, as Jung understood it, there are these floating islands in this vast sea. And these are known as the complexes. They are energy centers, and they have at their core what he calls archetypes. And those archetypes are immense energy, divine energy, that have the power to knock the ego right out. From the Jungian point of view, this is a very dangerous space to be in, because the ego has lost its power, the complex has taken over, and the archetypal energy is at work. Now, in a well-working psyche, the ego is strong enough to hold that complex in abeyance. And yes, let it develop, let it mature, but not to allow the archetype to take over. The archetype will be more powerful than the ego later on. When, for example, you have an ego strong enough to write, well trained that it can play music, and the ego can be forgotten while the archetypal energy is moving through. Or in prayer, for example, the ego is out of the road, the prayer is coming through. The archetypal energy is essential to life in the dimension that we as human beings relate to it.
Our ego and is by our education forced to wear a lot of masks and to behave in a unnatural form, and therefore we repress all sorts of natural animal reactions and simple human reactions out of politeness and good manners and whatever the situation requires. For people to learn to know their shadow and to live their shadow a bit more, it makes them generally more accessible and more natural and more round and human altogether. People without shadow who are perfect inflict an inferiority on their surrounding and irritate their surrounding. And that's why one is so relieved if something nasty happens to them and say, thank God he's also only human. I've noticed that analysts try to be very correct with their patients, but sometimes there's a slip-off. And I've often noticed that when I produce a real slip-off in an analytical hour and the patient can make me powerful reproaches, it improves our relationship. Because the analysants feel, oh, after all, von Franz is only human, and now I feel above her, and I'll pardon her. And that's a good feeling. And then one has a more natural human being to human being relationship. The shadow is really our best social function. It integrates us into the group. With our good qualities, we are above the group. With our shadow, we are man among men. And human all too human. And that is that's why the shadow is very often in dreams represented as something important, or which one should love or accept, or not scorn, but fully accept within oneself.